Hello, everybody. Welcome to Psychedelics Weekly. This is Joe Moore, joined by Kyle Buller. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, Joe. How are you doing?
Good. It's been many months since we've had a podcast together, so excited we can finally do it again.
Yeah. I was going to say, it feels like it's been forever since we've been rapping on the mic together.
Right. So this is a new segment called Psychedelics Weekly. We're going to try to do a new weekly show to bring back something like what we had with Solidarity Friday, but more kind of news, more topical, so you can stay a little bit more up to speed with what's happening in this whole psychedelic world that's moving super fast. Yeah, so it's been good to take a little break, but now we're back at it. So this will be about 30 minutes.
Much of a break, but yeah, just other priorities at times.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely not a break. We've been flat out building. So really excited to be here, though. Yeah. So I guess briefly, I just returned from Miami just yesterday. This episode will come out later this week. We're recording on November 8th. So this is actually a really important day for Colorado and psychedelic history as well. We'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I just returned from Microdos's Wonderland conference, billed as the largest psychedelic conference in the world. Yeah, it was pretty big.
Was it?
I don't know. Like, if they get bigger, it's going to be really weird.
How many people were there this year?
My estimate is 1,000.
Wow.
But we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Two stages.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And it was at a different venue, too.
Yeah.
How was it?
I had been to this when it was in Wynwood. It was in the Wynwood Mana Convention Center. I had been there previously for Miami NFT. I didn't know everybody. I didn't fly all the way to Miami for an NFT conference. I just went because I was really curious, and I was already in Miami for other things, and it was super interesting. So it was cool to see this space used differently. Similar layouts in that there was a huge stage, maybe 1,000 chairs out, and then kind of a secondary stage, and it was a little noisy at the second stage, but the primary stage was great. Like trade show booths were kind of crowding out the second stage a little bit, and it was super noisy. There's like a second or a third area too for workshops and film screenings where you actually wore kind of headphones. It was okay. That part. I had a great time. I barely saw any talks. I saw Carhart Harris do kind of a really great research roundup. And there was a panel about synthetics versus naturals. And that was fun. But yeah,
any interesting debate there?
I was hoping for more. Yeah, like the primary takeaway is that this whole concept of entourage effect actually came from, this is from a sidebar with Brett Green. It actually came from endocannabinoid system, and now we're just like applying it to plants all over the place. So it's a really shallow label, and we have to really be careful when we talk about labels like that and make a lot of meaning, right? Like people just run rampant with psilocybin containing mushrooms, and the idea that there theoretically could be some unknown entourage effect. We don't know is the answer if we're looking at the molecular level, right?
Yeah. Science is still young, I feel like. I mean, because they're just really like finding all sorts of different molecules within mushrooms within the past few years, right? I feel like I read a bunch of articles a couple of years ago finding, just new molecules in mushrooms. So it's interesting.
It's going to mature, right? People are going to do whole mushroom research on humans. There's probably 3 or 4 projects underway there now, or soon to be underway. And then we can compare results to NYU, right? Or Hopkins. So we'll have, a good control set, and maybe we'll figure it out one day. But yes, science is young. But I saw some really cool VR applications, some great art, some old friends, some new friends, saw some Vital students out there.
Nice.
It's kind of great to connect with a number of them, and a couple of them are real rock stars, so that was really great.
Yeah, there's some students are doing awesome things. I mean, everybody part of the program's awesome, but yeah, I think some of the people
it's fascinating, right?
Cool companies and whatnot that they're doing cool work.
Yeah. So nightlife was wild. Plenty of stories there. Yeah. So overall, really happy I went. I'll very likely go next year. You know, I'm hoping our conference will be a lot more fun, but let's see. You know, maybe this can be friendly competition annually with Microdose. So,
I mean, we had fun last year, and then I was just living all through social media. Like, so many people were posting. I was a little bummed I couldn't make it, but my travel schedule.
Do we want to talk about that briefly? So there's so much stuff blowing up on Twitter, right? So you know, nothing. So the Symposia crowd largely, and Sasha Cisco and one of our advisors and a few others, I think a FIU professor, was banned. Yeah, so it's an interesting list. I don't totally understand why everybody was banned. Like, I understand why Symposia was banned. You know, they've not been trying to really cultivate friendships, and Sasha similarly. But you know, it's interesting. I don't think we'll be doing that, but you know, people better have some reasonable behavior while you're at our conference, right? Yeah. So, you know, it's a tough thing. They ensued a whole Twitter storm, and that's all people were talking about for a few days there at Microdose, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess how do we feel about people being banned from conferences, and especially, I guess, like journalists trying to cover stuff, and you know, obviously they're sometimes they take a different approach to things, and I'm guessing that's probably why they were banned. Or I think I saw some stuff on Twitter around like threats, but you know, somebody posted a text that they had with like, I think it was Rick Doblin saying I didn't feel harmed or any sort of violence, but I mean, it just brings up an interesting point around, I guess, like cancel culture, or just like blocking people from entering to cover specific things because their viewpoints.
Yeah, and we could go in like, is it actually journalism what they do? Like, maybe. I think it's more like an op-ed mostly, but you know, it's a whole debate, right? And I'm sure there were journalists there. I saw a lot of cameras there. But yeah, these folks have made their name in trying to call out greed. But I think they made a name in like muddying the waters a little bit more than calling out greed, right? We have to figure out a way to see clearly around all this stuff. And you know, like the whole Compass Couch thing, like there's so much nuance there. And, trademarks and copyrights and all this stuff are part of the fabric of our reality. And is it better for some of us to do it, or is it better for J&J to do it? Right. I think it's better for us in the psychedelic scene to do it first, or come up with some sort of Creative Commons thing, some sort of nonprofit that can just be for the commons and hold patents and copyrights and trademarks for us all to use and protect. But I've not seen anybody make moves there yet. So these things are just floating out there, ripe for the picking, right? Yeah. And you know, people need to start figuring out how to be polite to one another. It's, you know, trust was broken when blackmail has happened in the past, and people have just been wildly abusive, right, on the internet. Like, yes, sexual predators need to be called out, and they need to be addressed in an appropriate way. But you know, is that the role of psychedelic media? Like, is that what you want to be known for, or do you want to build? Like, there's an option here: tear down or build. Building takes a lot more work, but it lasts a lot longer. And I think I said this on Solidarity Fridays, maybe when we stopped, but when Rome was sacked in the, around 800, 600, right around there maybe, AD, it took a very long time for the quality of life to get back to what it was in like the 1700s, 1800s. So, can we afford that? Can we afford to tear everything down? A lot more people are going to get hurt if we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to see how the field is evolving, and how people are either working together or not working together. Like, what's everybody's agenda? What's everybody's goals? I feel like, you know, at the start, everybody wanted psychedelics to be more accessible, and as like, you know, the monetization of it, and money's coming in to some degree, that does allow some scalability and accessibility, even though some of these therapies are going to be like so pricey, and you get into like the patent warts around stuff. But it's very nuanced, and it's like, how do we move forward? Like, what is the goal for everybody in this space? Is it to make psychedelics more accessible, and what does that look like? And sometimes it is very nuanced, right? And I always come back to like Bucky. Well, I'm sure you do too, Bucky Fuller, just around like building a new system, right? Or tearing it down. I saw some really interesting things when just with the whole like Burlington College thing. I was there. It was like it felt like it was getting torn down to some degree, and no real plan. And then when it did collapse, everybody was like, "What just happened?" It was like, well, we didn't really think about maybe what was actually happening. It was just a lot of emotion of wanting to tear structure down, and not really realizing the impact that, well, what happens when you do tear it down? Do you have a plan? Do you know where that's going to go? And then it's just left with nothing. So it's just really kind of examining like our own ideas, beliefs, philosophies around stuff, and what's the agenda here? Can we work together? Are we just getting more divided? Seems like just in politics in general, we're very divided. But
right. So what does everybody want to do? We have a lot of parties at the table here. And I think we all have very different ideas on what we want to do, right? Yeah. I heard a line yesterday. If any of this stuff becomes above ground, it's immediately not sacred for them. So the sacredness is comes from it being illegal and underground, which is a really fascinating thing.
Well, it feels special, right? If like not everybody's doing it, everybody's posting their like microdosing and trip reports on like TikTok and stuff, and just like you feel like you have something special to hold on to that not everybody knows about. It does feel more sacred. It does feel more special. And I'm wondering, again, doing our own self-reflection and self-awareness, sometimes it does feel like that. And I know I've battled up against some of those feelings as things become, more mainstream, and there's maybe voices out there that, haven't maybe been engaged in it. They had like one ayahuasca experience and they have a huge platform talking about stuff. And, there is a little bit of that, like, whoa, what's going on here? And it's like having a little bit of that sacredness is nice. It's like, oh, there's like, a container, there's maybe like a lineage to follow after. It feels like you have a different relationship with it. But what happens when it becomes more mainstream? But on the other side, it's like, isn't that what a lot of people wanted? If everybody, like not everybody, but, just that general, phrase like psychedelics can heal the world, like there's a lot of optimism there. And it's like, if that was like a common goal for a lot of folks of like getting these medicines out there to folks, it's like these are the feelings that we're going to have to deal with if you do feel like it's sacred and should remain underground. It's like, then does that actually create like gatekeeping on who actually gets access and healing if it's not fully accessible? So it's interesting.
It's a big deal. This is a nice transition. We could go for hours on this topic alone, but this transition to Prop 122 in Colorado. Interlude first. In Miami, I actually got to meet a number of Native American church folks, and we talked a lot about the bridge between our communities, and there's no real bridge, right? They're not really aware at all of what we're up to, and very few of us understand what they're up to. To any meaningful degree, and I think we need to learn a lot more about what's going on there based on the storytelling. And we did a little ceremony, no plants at all, and a lot of storytelling, a lot of drumming, a lot, big fire.
Nice.
And it was a big cultural transmission for me. So it's all about preserving their culture and keeping the fire alive. And this Native American church ceremonies is how they're doing that. And, there's a lot of diverse opinions inside there. And it bridged over to the Soul Quest case. And the Soul Quest case this religious group actually lost. It would have been a huge boon to assorted Native American groups in the United States. So the idea being that every Christian or, group has monstrous amounts of religious freedom here, but if you just swap in Native American and their practices, it's immediately illegal. And the DEA won't really budge, and they're trying to be obstructionist. So there's going to be a lot of stuff here. I'm going to cover this at length later, but just kind of a teaser that it was actually a big blow to Native American rights that SoulQuest lost that case, and thankfully SoulQuest is going to keep going, which is really neat. Yeah. All right. So Prop 122. What do you know about this one, Kyle?
Well, you're voting on it today in Colorado, that's for sure. Or at least, all the Coloradans are voting on it. So legalizing psilocybin first in kind of more of a regulated market, and correct me if I'm wrong here. And then after a few years, they'll expand that into other medicines such as ayahuasca and maybe mescaline-containing cacti and other substances.
Yeah, let me clear it up. So yeah, it's immediately psilocybin, psilocin, mescaline, DMT, and ibogaine will be decriminalized. Like a policeman could find it in your pocket and not be able to even take it if it's like loosely defined personal use limits, right? So easily you could be walking around with an eighth of mushrooms, 3.5 grams, and be fine. So that's a big deal. Records will be expunged. In a sense, I think sealed was the language they used, and then any current court case will get dropped, and amazing, right? So immediately helping people and starting to curb the drug war a bit. And the decriminalized frame will allow for a good, healthy amount of community, personal sharing and transfer, growing, etc. And I think there's some pretty good inclusions for religious liberty in there. So really amazing. And the mescaline thing excludes peyote, by the way.
That's what I figured.
Colorado already has some pretty substantial laws around allowing tribes, NAC groups to use peyote. So further, within a 2-year period, an advisory committee appointed by the governor will help define our rules. And there's going to be all sorts of ancillary groups trying to lobby for these rules to help it be better, and really excited about that. And what we'll see is, psilocybin go legal first. So there will be service centers. It's going to be, I think, very improved from Oregon. I think an individual can only own 5. So even if you're a corporation, you could only own 5. So even if you were part of 3 corporations, you as an individual can only directly have 5, so you would get in the way of the other corporations buying more, which is really cool. So there's really substantial limits. And then, they would look at what it looks like to implement iboga likely next, and DMT maybe shortly after, maybe. And there's debate there. There's really robust debate around a legalized frame for ayahuasca, because like the idea of go to a doctor's office and drink it and like have your whole experience in a kind of boring doctor's office, that's a little weird. But I can imagine there being some really good use cases, and I like the legal angle for safe supply and all that. So we'll see. I don't know. And iboga, ibogaine, we're going to have to figure all that out as well.
So there's been some opposition there, even from folks part of the psychedelic community. I wonder if you could talk about that, if you know what was some of the opposition.
A lot of people think it's going too fast. There wasn't enough time for community commentary, but a lot of the community was invited to contribute. There's concerns about corporate takeover. There's some fears about big pharma coming in and dominating. I can't really imagine use cases in which big pharma would come in and try to dominate. It's federally illegal. They can get a license just fine elsewhere to do this legally. Colorado gives them no advantage. Can you think of any use cases for big pharma to come into a situation like this? I just can't come up with any.
I mean, most big pharma is doing biotech plays, right? Because you can't patent mushrooms and create a medicine around that. So, I mean, my take is that would big pharma be interested in that, or they're more interested in some of these biotech new novel molecule plays, so they are able to patent it and come up with a new novel compound that they could sell in the market. But I think people I don't know. The more that I follow some of the pharma and biotech, it seems like they're more interested in some of those more novel compounds that they can own.
Totally.
I mean, just look at esketamine, for example, and Janssen Pharmaceuticals, right? It's like, well, like, let's toss out racemic ketamine and create something different.
So it's interesting. And what are some other ones? There was a healthy amount of Native American inclusion in the bill, in the writing of the bill. And the opposition says there wasn't enough, of course, and fair. What else was there? At the Chacruna event, there was somebody in Denver. There was a big Chacruna kind of rally for the vote, and a lot of the Denver community came out. And somebody from Ecuador, I believe, came up and kind of went really hard on Colorado, kind of saying it was super colonial. I think about it long and hard, but I'm like, what is the right path here? What is colonial in this context? And for sure, there are some elements here and there, but isn't it more colonial to be putting people in prison? Like, there's legendary ayahuasqueros in prison right now, and like, isn't that a global travesty? Like, we got to figure that out.
I think it was a Czech couple got arrested for ayahuasca. I mean, not in the United States, but this stuff happens, right? And if we can like have some laws that pass and kind of decrease the drug war on drugs, like, I feel like that's somewhat of a win. And I know some of the opposition, and correct me if I'm wrong here again, but was a kind of around the decriminalization aspect of it, and around what is personal possession, and not
they hated the possession limit idea. They wanted absolutely no possession limits. Allegedly, like, there are cases here. It looks pretty clear, though, that if somebody's growing and the church has 100 members, like, the possession of the church is divided by 100. That's kind of what everybody's saying. That said, it will have to get tested in court, but I think that's a really easy argument, because why should everybody in the church have to do that? That's, not everybody in the Catholic Church has to make their own wine and wafers, right? It's illogical. And Colorado has some decent religious protections, I believe. So, hopefully it goes forward. Like, you and I talk about this all the time. Like, the real path is probably groups and religions. Otherwise, this stuff is so unattainable. And I think there's really healthy religious inclusion here. And that was a big part of people's, decisions as they're building this bill. So it's a big time thing.
Do you think it's going to pass today? Like, have you been
I'm going to be an optimist and say yes. But, by the time this comes out, we'll know, right? I'm going to an election party tonight. It's going to be interesting to see what everybody's saying. People worked really hard to pull this through. And let's talk about the dynamic here, right? So all of those things were like the anti parts. How do we balance those against parts, and like decrim nature ideologies, with how many people could be helped at scale? How many people will never access these things in a decriminalized frame? How many people will be helped in the decriminalized frame, and how many more will be helped once these things look a little bit more like the healthcare that they're familiar with, right? Like Joe's Mushroom Shack and like Telluride, like, who's going to go there, right? It's got to,
maybe
I wouldn't do that with antibiotics, like, unless I was trying to have a really great time, with the doctor. But what does that look like, and how do we balance
that's interesting. Like, remember when we were in the grill and having like a bunch of people, like, you had that person with like their little mushroom card, or like having this like, person just walk on the street, hey, you want some mushrooms, and thinking, I don't know if I want to buy mushrooms off of you. Like, I'd rather go to a place where like I have a trusted source, and I know that I'm going to get like a good product, versus somebody that's just kind of selling it off the street like that. But I mean, obviously people are buying stuff off the street all the time in the this legacy market, underground market, whatever we want to call it.
Right. Like, I'm not buying mushrooms at Red Rocks, that's for sure. Or when I go to an event, it's like, plan everybody. That's the way to have increased safety and make it a team sport. And decriminalization at this level will make it a lot safer for all underground operators going right now. Colorado has had mushroom arrests, like, what was that guy's name? Cole. We did a really good podcast there, and the drug war's still going. They're still trying to hold on. As illogical and as loose as their grip is, they're still trying. So we got to be careful here, and safe supply is important. The feds have shown their hand in the past that they are willing to poison supply to hurt people.
Well, that and also like proper dosing too. Like I'm just even again coming back to cannabis, and I know there's a lot of opinions on how cannabis like got off, and the corporate interest there and all that. But I mean, there is something really nice about being able to go to a dispensary, and I really enjoy edibles and getting like low dose edibles and knowing the dose that I'm getting versus like getting a brownie from a friend that I have no idea like what's in there. And in the vein of harm reduction, like it's again knowing your dose, like knowing what you're taking, why you want to take it, and that's really hard to do with at home goods sometimes. And so I've appreciated that. Like I like edibles for the sense that I can feel like I can dose properly versus just trying to make it on my own and be like, well, I'm taking the gamble here. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Right. Exactly. It's a big deal. And, just carefully consider how many people will have better deaths and better lives if this goes through relative to, And there's another argument here, Kyle. Like I had a really good conversation with a friend a week or so ago, and he was really worried about ceremonies just being effectively illegal and ritual use and ceremonial use being illegal and not included. And it's really a big misunderstanding. That's like definitely going to be a big part of it. It just won't be a part of the regulated frame. Right?
So people will be able to have like ceremony because of the decrim nature of the bill.
Exactly.
There will be places where people can go to a service center, like what's happening in Oregon, where you can receive that service if you want to.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a big deal for a lot of people, right? Like there's a lot of people that want a regulated framework. Again, like just thinking about people that I've chatted with, say like, potential people reaching out for harm reduction integration work over the years, like wanting to go to a place that is like a service with professionals, and trying to navigate the underground world can be, kind of exhausting, and you never know who you're doing stuff with.
It's impossible, right?
So it's just like options, right? Like I, love to see all those underground ceremonies continue, and there's a need for that. And it's, again, like, it's accessible to a lot of folks, but there's also people that really need extra structure, and like having like a professional service like that where it can be regulated a little bit. And yeah, I think we just need to come back to having a diverse ecosystem. And I feel like we're sometimes really bad with this because it's like, I don't know, I forget who said it. Maybe it was Ben Sessa in Vermont, but just saying, for a field, or maybe it was in one of our classes, but for a field that's like so open-minded, or, supposed to be very open-minded, we can be very dogmatic, and things need to be a certain way. And we do need a lot of different options, and realize like one way isn't going to be the best way for everybody. And how do we understand the needs of a diverse population and being able to appreciate all those different needs? So yeah, diversity is important here.
Yeah. One last thing, and then we'll talk about navigating psychedelics before we wrap here. So there was a big vote at Wonderland for Podcast of the Year. And a lot of people voted on that, and it ended up being removed. We don't know who won. We have some theories, but we don't know who won. I'm gonna ask them later when I get a chance to have a phone call. So we'll keep you posted. Maybe we won Podcast of the Year, or maybe they just decided to cancel it.
Yeah, maybe they didn't get enough votes on podcasts and they decided to remove it.
Yeah. So anyway, Navigating Psychedelics is coming up, Kyle. You're gonna help me teach it a little bit. We're gonna keep adding some more instructors. Starts November 29th, is that right?
November 29th, yeah, Tuesday, and then we also have a Wednesday class, and then there's 4 different times between those 2 classes. I think the time's the best, since I think they were in Mountain Time advertised.
Yeah, cool. So what is it? 5:00 Mountain Time and then 8:00 Mountain Time. So I wanted to be able to bring more Pacific folks in. So folks in California, this time zone's really for you. Typically we're really East Coast heavy, Europe heavy, but we wanted to add an extra late version so you could get started at 7 p.m. Pacific time and be a little comfortable there. And we've had some luck having some Australians join too, right, in the evening courses. So
in the past,
folks over there, yeah, if you want to check it out, maybe this time works for you. It's usually, an okay early start. It's not the worst early start for you. Yeah, and it's a 9-week program, 47 hours of training. We're going to actually do something new this time. Is I'm going to be the consistent teacher, and we're going to actually bring in folks like Kyle, David Drapkin, other clinicians, I think CJ Spotwood. We're going to try to recruit a whole mess of folks that maybe you haven't had exposure to yet. And it's a great way to kickstart your community. We are selling it pretty rapidly, so if you want to make sure you have the spot you want, come check it out. psychedelicstoday.com and click on Education Center.
Or psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And
that's right.
Yeah, if you've been looking for a way to, get into the psychedelic field, whether you're a therapist, you're a clinician, you're a wellness practitioner, you're a student, this is a really great kind of introduction. Or even if you've been, practicing for a while, and you just kind of want to build community and get to know other folks, this is a really great course. And I always like to say that, I think it's really important as we start to as psychedelics start to become more mainstream and more people are becoming interested in it, to really develop these kind of psychedelic informed competencies and becoming psychedelically literate, right? So it's like, how do we help to remove stigma in our communities and in the world, right? There's a lot of people that might be really wanting to explore this and don't know how to talk to their practitioners, friends, community around their interests. I think a lot more people are starting to become open about it. But how do you support somebody that's coming in to a practice that's interested in wanting to explore psychedelics? It's still taboo. People are still a little bit nervous around talking about it, but they're doing it. And so how do we create that sense of safety for people to open up? And I think it starts with getting educated, becoming psychedelically informed, and developing that literacy and those competencies so that you're able to go out, serve your clients, serve your community, and be a resource for everybody.
Right. The more we learn about how many possible applications there are for psychedelics, there's a greater need now than ever for folks to become psychedelically literate. People are suffering. People are killing themselves for all sorts of different reasons, from pain to depression to whatever else. And we've got to be informed as to what could help these folks. The suicide rate is unnecessarily high. We could be helping endless amounts of folks with eating disorders, which is like the number one most difficult psychiatric indication to treat. I think in part because it's so poorly understood. Chronic pain. There's so much here. And, this is an introductory course. This is not like, hey, go, now you're a facilitator. This is, 47 hours giving you a good understanding of what's going on in the field. Like, if you know what you want to do and you want to be a facilitator, there's plenty of trainings out there just to be a straight up facilitator, but we want you to understand this landscape more broadly.
So becoming like a psychedelic informed practitioner, right? Whether you're a therapist, you're a clinician, you're working with clients, or maybe you're a community educator out there trying to do stuff to educate your community. So being able to put that into practice and help your community and clients with all this.
Yeah, right on. Cool. So everybody, again, it starts November 29th and November 30th, depending on which group you pick. And you can learn more at psychedelicstoday.com or psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And we'll have links in the show notes here. So thanks, Kyle. This is fun. Glad we get to do a weekly show again. And I only wish it was daily, but maybe a couple of years out.
We'll get there, hopefully.
All right, man. Have a great one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Psychedelics Weekly, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.